I'm not going to lie, this episode really messed with my head. I was 21 years old when I first saw The Exorcist, and like many others, it was a disturbing experience and one that left an indelible mark on me. In creating this episode, the day after day research, depictions, and imagery sometimes took me into a weird headspace, but I'm over it. So here's the story. In 1949, a chilling and controversial case captivated America and challenged the boundaries between faith, psychology, and the supernatural. The story of Ronald Edwin Hunkler, a young boy from Maryland reportedly possessed by a demonic force, shocked religious and secular communities alike. Known today as one of the most well documented cases of demonic possession in U.S. history, the Ronald Hunkler case was the inspiration for The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty, a novel and later film that would forever change the horror genre and public perceptions of exorcism. This will always be a case deeply rooted in the realm of the extremely strange. Post-World War II America saw a marked increase in interest in the supernatural, influenced by a period of societal upheaval and existential questioning. The war's massive loss of life and the trauma it left behind led many to seek meaning in forces beyond the physical world. This period also marked the early stages of the Cold War, which stoked anxieties about unseen threats, amplifying public curiosity about paranormal and occult topics. Media and popular culture, especially through movies, radio, and literature, capitalized on these fears and curiosities, introducing themes of hauntings, possession, and otherworldly encounters to the mainstream. This atmosphere created fertile ground for cases like the Ronald Hunkler exorcism to capture the public's imagination, framing supernatural beliefs as both a response to and an escape from real-world fears. Ronald was a young boy born in the 1930s, raised in Cottage City, Maryland, within a close Lutheran family. His family background was typical of the time, marked by a structured religious upbringing with strong family bonds. Ronald was reportedly shy, quiet, and somewhat isolated, without many close friends his age. Instead, he developed a deep connection with his Aunt Harriet, a family member known for her interest in spiritualism. Aunt Harriet, who practiced spiritualist rituals and owned a Ouija board, often involved Ronald in her interests, possibly sparking his fascination with the occult. Following Harriet's sudden death in 1949, Ronald's life took a dramatic turn. Grieving the loss of his aunt, he and his family began experiencing a series of strange occurrences in their home. They began subtly with scratching and knocking sounds coming from the walls and floors of Ronald's bedroom. At first, his family believed these noises could have a rational explanation, perhaps from animals or structural issues in the house. However, as the events grew more intense and unexplainable, the family's skepticism turned to fear. Furniture would reportedly shake or move on its own, and household items like vases and chairs would topple or fly across rooms without any visible cause. More disturbingly, these phenomena seemed to follow Ronald from one location to another, and attempts to stop them, such as blessing the house or removing objects associated with his aunt, proved ineffective. Ronald himself also began to experience unsettling physical symptoms, such as sudden violent shaking and involuntary movements that seemed beyond his control. Witnesses recalled that he would slip into what appeared to be trances, speaking in deep, guttural tones or crying out in pain, further alarming his family. As his behavior and the strange events surrounding him became increasingly disturbing, his family initially sought explanations through medical and psychological channels. Doctors and psychiatrists conducted evaluations, aiming to diagnose any physical or mental health issues that might explain the boy's symptoms. However, none of the professionals found a concrete medical or psychological cause, leaving his family without answers. Doctors noted his physical symptoms such as violent spasms and contortions and his outbursts in unfamiliar voices, but these symptoms did not align with any known medical condition. The lack of a medical diagnosis intensified the family's fear, driving them to look for other explanations. When medical options failed, the family turned to their Lutheran pastor, Reverend Luther Schulze, for spiritual guidance. Reverend Schulze was known in the community for his open-mindedness and willingness to address unusual situations. Curious and compassionate, he visited the family's home to witness the phenomena for himself. During his visit, he reportedly observed furniture moving without any apparent cause and heard the unsettling noises that had become commonplace in the Hunkler household. Convinced that Ronald's symptoms went beyond a medical or psychological issue, Schulze suggested that the family reach out to the Catholic Church, as Lutheranism did not traditionally practice exorcisms. At his urging, the family contacted a local Catholic priest, Father E. Albert Hughes, in Washington, D.C. After interviewing the family and observing some of Ronald's behaviors, Hughes agreed to attempt an exorcism under the church's guidelines. He prepared by following the Roman ritual, the established set of prayers and rites for casting out evil spirits. During the initial exorcism session, Hughes immediately observed behavior in Ronald that was far from ordinary. The boy became violent, shouting in guttural voices and thrashing wildly, exhibiting a strength that seemed impossible for a child. At one point, he managed to break free from his restraints, pulling out a bed spring and using it to lash out at the priest, injuring Hughes. This unexpected violence, combined with Ronald's intense aversion to sacred objects, left Father Hughes shaken and unsure of how to proceed. Overwhelmed by the physical and psychological toll of the ritual, he ultimately decided to step away from the case, suggesting that the Hunkler family might need more experienced help to address what appeared to be a severe and possibly dangerous possession. After Father Hughes' withdrawal, the family continued to search for help and found a lead in St. Louis. Encouraged by a message that appeared on Ronald's body spelling the word Louis, the family traveled to St. Louis to seek further assistance from relatives and the Catholic Church there. This journey led them to Father William Bowdern, a Jesuit priest with a strong reputation in the St. Louis diocese. Father Bowdern took on the case with the assistance of his colleague, Father Walter Halloran, and student priest, Father Raymond Bishop, who would later document much of what they witnessed. Father Bowdern took a methodical approach, beginning with a series of thorough examinations to assess the boy's behavior and responses. A seasoned Jesuit priest, he believed it was essential to distinguish between mental illness and true possession. He worked alongside Father Halloran and other clergy members, documenting Ronald's reactions to sacred rituals and objects. They carefully observed his behavior over multiple days, noting the aversion to anything associated with the church, including holy water, crucifixes, and prayer books. As Father Bowdern initiated formal exorcism sessions, he too relied on the Roman ritual, a set of prayers and rites described by the Catholic Church for casting out evil spirits. The sessions typically began with prayers to invoke God's protection, followed by the sprinkling of holy water over Ronald and around the room. The The priest would then recite passages from the Bible and chant specific prayers designed to weaken the influence of any malevolent spirit. Sacred texts such as the Our Father and the Hail Mary were repeatedly recited, as these prayers were considered powerful defenses against demonic entities. The exorcism sessions were particularly grueling, often stretching for hours and extending over multiple days and weeks. Father Bowden, Father Halloran, and others involved faced not only physical fatigue but also emotional strain, as they struggled against what seemed to be a powerful malevolent force resisting every prayer and ritual. The intensity of each session left the priest emotionally drained, yet they were resolute in their commitment to free Ronald from his suffering. Father Bowden's notes and the accounts from Father Halloran provide a glimpse into the exhausting nature of these sessions. Bowden described the ordeal as one of unimaginable strain, both spiritually and physically. One observer noted,
Father Bowden would often look completely drained by the end of each session. His face showed the strain, as if he had aged years in a matter of weeks.
Father Halloran later recalled the physical demands of the session, stating,
"It was like holding down a raging animal. He had strength beyond his years and size."
Ronald's violent reactions during the rituals required constant vigilance. The priest reported that he would thrash, kick, and attempt to break free, forcing them to physically restrain him, often with multiple people holding him down. This required intense concentration and physical effort, which, combined with the emotionally charged atmosphere, created an almost unbearable tension in the room. Father Bowden sometimes fasted and engaged in prolonged prayer in preparation, which only added to his fatigue. At times, Ronald would scream obscenities or threats in that deep guttural voice, which Bowden described as not his own. Halloran noted that the language and tone coming from the boy's mouth was disturbing and unnatural, leaving those present shaken and on edge. According to witnesses, he would speak in foreign languages he had never studied and react violently when he was sprinkled with holy water, leading the priests to believe they were truly dealing with a possession. By the end of each session, the room felt heavy and drained, as one witness recounted, reflecting the toll it took on everyone involved. Despite the hardships, Bowden remained resolute, driven by his belief in the importance of the task and the conviction that he could help Ronald find peace. He reportedly said, "I was prepared for a struggle, but nothing could have prepared me for the depth of evil I felt in that room." This conviction helped him and his team press forward, session after session, despite the relentless strain and exhaustion they endured. As the exorcism of Ronald Hunkeler neared its climactic sessions, the tension and intensity reached a level that left all involved deeply shaken. The priest had already been through grueling days of physical exertion and spiritual struggle, and his behaviors were growing more extreme. Each session seemed to heighten his resistance, with Ronald exhibiting violent physical contortions and shouting phrases that sounded foreign and unnatural, increasing the priest's fears that they were up against a formidable demonic presence. During these final sessions, Ronald's body would twist and arch in ways that defied normal physical limitations, causing concern among those present that he could seriously harm himself. Witnesses recounted how his limbs would contort at alarming angles, his back would arch into a high, tense bow, and his face would contort as he let out inhuman screams. His strength remained formidable, often requiring the priests and assistants to continue to pin him down just to keep him from hurting himself or others. The voices he emitted varied in tone and timbre, with some sounding authoritative and commanding, while others hissed and spat vulgar phrases, which shocked everyone in the room. Ronald's voice at times took on the sound of multiple speakers, as if several entities were speaking through him in unison, further adding to the horror of the scene. In addition to these disturbing physical displays, Ronald began to speak in Latin phrases he had never learned, reciting passages and words that only the trained priests would recognize. Phrases like Christus Domini or Christ the Lord and other liturgical terms would burst forth from his mouth, his voice fluctuating between calm and agitated states. One priest noted that he seemed to be mocking their prayers at times, reciting fragments of the Roman ritual in a mocking tone, only to follow it with violent outbursts that shattered the solemnity of the rites. At the height of one such session, Father Bowden recalled feeling a chill sweep through the room, almost as if an unseen presence was retaliating against their prayers. Amid these agonizing, intense sessions, a turning point finally arrived. In one final moment of peak intensity, Ronald's body suddenly relaxed, and he paused, taking a calm breath, a sharp contrast to the turmoil that had overtaken him just minutes before. Seemingly out of nowhere, he proclaimed in a strong, clear voice, Christus Domini, his eyes fixed and his expression serene. The priest watched in stunned silence as his whole demeanor shifted from agitation to calm, his once tense muscles now relaxed. Ronald's declaration of Christus Domini reverberated through the room, and as if in response to his words, the oppressive tension that had filled the air dissipated. After this powerful proclamation, Ronald seemed to settle into an unusual state of peace. His body no longer racked with violent convulsions, and the guttural voices that had tormented him fell silent. The atmosphere in the room felt markedly lighter, and those present sensed that a significant battle had been won. Overwhelmed with relief and exhaustion, Father Bowden and his team concluded the exorcism, believing that the boy had finally been freed from the entity that had possessed him. Following this climactic moment, Ronald reportedly returned to a state of normalcy. He experienced no further episodes of supernatural behavior or aggression, and his family, profoundly grateful, believed he had finally been liberated from whatever dark force had tormented him. The exorcism, while successful, left an indelible mark on everyone involved, with Father Bowden later describing the event as a profound encounter with evil. The harrowing sessions not only solidified the case as one of the most intense exorcisms in American history, but also underscored the power of faith, persistence, and resilience in the face of the inexplicable. The case of Ronald Hunkeler has prompted significant psychological inquiry, with many researchers and clinicians suggesting alternative explanations for his symptoms beyond demonic possession. Several theories rooted in psychology and psychiatry could provide insight into the phenomena Ronald exhibited, including dissociative identity disorder, repressed trauma, and mass psychogenic illness. In analyzing the case, it's crucial to recognize how religious beliefs, particularly in the 1940s cultural context, may have significantly influenced the family's interpretation of the events that unfolded. The intersection of faith, cultural perceptions of the supernatural, and the trauma Ronald experienced shaped how his family and the priests involved understood and responded to his troubling behavior. Given the heightened religious atmosphere of mid-20th century America, combined with specific historical and societal factors, it becomes clear that religious beliefs played a central role in framing the events as a possession rather than a psychological or medical disorder. The family's faith in the power of the Church also influenced their decision to seek help from the Catholic priests, despite their Lutheran background. At the time, Catholicism's established rites of exorcism, coupled with the Church's authority on matters of possession, would have made Catholic priests appear as the appropriate figures to deal with such a serious spiritual issue. As Ronald's symptoms worsened and he became increasingly violent, the family saw in his behavior clear signs of a spiritual battle. The story of Ronald Hunkeler and the subsequent exorcism case has had an undeniable and lasting influence on horror media, religious beliefs surrounding exorcism, and the development of paranormal folklore. The events surrounding Ronald's possession, as described in news reports and later in various publications, became a cultural touchstone, particularly when William Peter Blatty's novel The Exorcist was published in 1971. The novel and its subsequent film adaptation were directly inspired by this case, and they set the stage for a new wave of horror that would shape the genre for decades to come. Beyond media, the case also influenced religious and cultural views on possession, exorcism, and the nature of evil. Movies like The Omen, the Amityville Horror, and the Conjuring series all continued the legacy of The Exorcist, presenting stories about demonic forces, possession, and the human struggle against evil. The case and its media representations also had a ripple effect on other religious communities. Protestant and evangelical Christians, particularly in the United States, began to place greater emphasis on spiritual warfare and the casting out of demons, drawing on biblical teachings about possession and exorcism. These beliefs found expression in a wide range of Christian ministries and televangelism, where figures like Bob Larson, a prominent exorcist, and others sought to address demonic oppression through deliverance ministries, often involving exorcisms that were less formalized than those performed by the Catholic Church. The exorcism of Ronald Hunkler remains one of the most chilling and influential stories in the history of paranormal phenomena. The eerie events surrounding the young boy, his violent outbursts, and the grueling exorcism rituals performed by Catholic priests have inspired a lasting legacy that continues to resonate in both horror media and the collective consciousness of society. The case not only provided the foundation for The Exorcist, one of the most iconic horror films of all time, but also shaped how we perceive demonic possession, exorcism, and the struggle between good and evil. So whether you see the case as a supernatural occurrence or a psychological phenomenon, the story continues to capture our imaginations, urging us to consider the limits of human understanding and the eternal battle between darkness and light.